Dr. David Thompson received his Bachelor of Science in Animal Science from Louisiana Tech University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1986. He earned his DVM degree from Louisiana State University in 1989 and practiced as a small animal veterinarian for 1 year before accepting a job with the USDA Food Safety Inspection Services, or FSIS, as an in-plant veterinarian in 1990. Since 1991, Dr. Thompson has also worked as a relief veterinarian for the Jackson Zoological Park. In 1999, Dr. Thompson entered an MPH program with a focus in toxicology, but ultimately elected not to pursue the MPH degree after being promoted by the FSIS to District Veterinary Medical Specialist covering the states of Mississippi, Tennessee, and Alabama. Since then, in addition to being promoted to Deputy District Manager with the FSIS and providing administrative oversight to 1,100 food safety employees in over 450 federally inspected processing facilities in the states of Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, and Kentucky. Dr. Thompson also performed humane handling investigations in Puerto Rico, California, and Alabama as a result of complaints lodged by animal rights groups. He delivered lectures on animal welfare and regulatory veterinary medicine at the Colleges of Veterinary Medicine in Louisiana and Mississippi. Served in the U.S. Air Force and the Mississippi Air National Guard as a commissioned officer at the rank of Major, acted as public health officer in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, and was a part of a medical response team during Hurricane Katrina, and served as public affairs liaison for the USDA to the U.S. Coast Guard during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Dr. Thompson lives in Mississippi with his 2 children and his wife, who is a companion animal veterinarian. In his spare time, Dr. Thompson is an assistant coach for a FIRST robotics team, volunteers with Nepris, an online platform that enables professionals to share their knowledge and passion via video conference with kids in classrooms all over the country, and he is a distributor for LifeVantage, a manufacturer of products for health and longevity for both pets and humans. Dr. David Thompson, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It is quite my pleasure to be here. Looking forward to something of this sort.
Oh, I have so many things that I want to ask you. And when I was reading your bio, I had to chuckle because I honestly don't understand how you can do all of the things that you do. And my first question is, do you ever sleep? And if you do, then who's doing your laundry and cleaning your house and buying your groceries and cooking dinner and going to the bank and doing all the other things, all the other errands? Like, how can you possibly do all the things that you do?
Well, my wife and I are both veterinarians. I work the full time. She works the part time. So yes, she does handle the laundry and the cooking, and I take care of many of the other items.
Yes.
So yes, I could not do it without her. We have a wonderful working relationship, and even sometimes the pillow talk is veterinary medicine.
Yes, yes. Well, that's a benefit of marrying a veterinarian or a doctor. But I thought that must have been it. That must have been it. Somebody must be working part-time in order for all of this to work. So that makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's just begin with, tell me about why you wanted to be a veterinarian and when you made that decision.
Okay. Well, growing up on a farm, my initial interest me was heavy equipment. I operated every type of tractor, backhoe, bulldozer, hay equipment, everything needed on the farm to keep farms running. I worked a rodeo, I worked a thoroughbred broodmare operation, and then plus we all had our own hobby farm, the cutting, raking, and baling hay for the animals there. But just growing up in agriculture, that was my interest, and primarily was heavy equipment design and manufacturing. Through the years, I learned to fix most everything that broke out in the field. I used to make a joke that when it's Friday night and something breaks down and you figure out you're going to be late for a date, you learn how to fix something. And so that became my first interest in engineering, agricultural engineering to be exact. And that's what I started in my college career, was agricultural engineering. it came time for the calculus and the drafting, and found out my skills there did not have me adequately prepared. So the next choice was veterinary medicine. I switched over to animal science, and my career or my college education just flourished.
Okay. And so did you want to be a large animal veterinarian? Because when you started your career as a vet, you were a small animal vet, right?
Well, it was a town of about 30,000, and it was a mixed practice.
I see.
The two veterinarians in town were already small animal. Most of the demand was for the large animal, which I still enjoyed, and go out and making the calls. But in some of the areas where I was raised, and the rural area where no one has a feedlot operation, most of the time you needed to see the large animals was after their regular job. So it was lots of early morning and late night calls in addition to your regular 9 or 10 hour day. So there was no life.
Right. Yeah. Clinical practice is hard. Large animal, small animal, mixed animal, whatever. Clinical practice is hard and demanding. So is that why you decided to leave clinical practice?
Well, one of my reasons was primarily financial. We had one of the economic downturns in the small practice I was at. We were getting bankruptcies. People weren't paying their bills, and the owner managing veterinarian just popped up one day and said, if I were you, I wouldn't stick around here. Now, just so happened, my mentor was a USDA veterinarian that also had a part-time business on the thoroughbred broodmare farm. And he says, I quite understand. And if this is something that you're interested in, we have positions for someone like you that may not be as happy with clinical practice as you would like. And here's everything else, all the benefits. And so 3 months later, I moved from Louisiana to Mississippi with a $7,500 raise and benefits, insurance. That was probably one of our biggest sticking points, was when the veterinarian says our business wasn't so good and I can't pay your insurance premium.
Right.
Now, this is 28 years ago. So some of those things what applied back then still apply today.
They do.
And that's been, February 20th, tomorrow will be 28 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And I must presume that staying with the FSIS for 28 years, you've been very happy.
Yes, I have. Yeah. There's been moments like any job that it's you feel like that day's just not going well, but there are other days now. Let's say I supervise or manage 800 inspectors and another 120 veterinarians in the 4 states that I cover. But the satisfaction of knowing that we provide a safe food product to the tables in America and then to the rest of the world. When you see the numbers and stats of the food protein products that come out of the United States into the world, it is staggering.
Staggering, yes, I believe you. I just want to return one moment to what you were saying about retirement benefits and insurance and all that. I think that's one of the biggest. It's something that makes me pretty sad about veterinary medicine in general, from a small animal clinician's perspective. Is a lot of hospitals are small hospitals. Of course, we've got more corporate hospitals coming along, more and more, but they're still a minority. But a lot of hospitals, they don't or they can't offer retirement benefits or insurance. And I just think that this makes it so much more difficult than it ought to be for veterinarians who've worked so hard to become veterinarians and to not have the stability or the security of those things.
And it is absolutely one of the importance that I reflect on with my career. Since 2005, since I've been a deputy, part of my job has been recruiting and hiring veterinarians into USDA FSIS. And we see 3 distinct patterns of people coming into our agency. New graduates, which are great. It'll probably be one of the best decisions they'll ever make in their life. The others are veterinarians that have had 30 years and they're looking close to retirement and realize they don't have any savings. They don't have any insurance that they can afford to carry into their retirement. So they come to work with us for 5, 10 years. The other ones are ones for some other reason the economy has downturned and have just literally closed up shop. The last time was 2008, 2009. I think I hired 20 veterinarians that year for our district, and probably one of the first times we were able to fill all of our vacancies. And it was the same thing. I'm just paying myself, I'm working myself to death and not seeing any of the benefits. And what we also have is we have you for 8 or 9 hours a day. And then if you're still, as a typical veterinarian, used to that work, you can work some additional hours, work some weekends. Many of us do have a second career, as I call veterinarian is my hobby. When I'm doing some of the zoo work or when my military career, one weekend a month and then 2 weeks out of the year. That was one part of veterinary medicine as a public health officer that I just thoroughly enjoyed, serving my country and protecting another herd of animals called Air Force Airmen.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, it sounds to me like the kind of job that you've got is ideal because you've got the stability, the security, you've got a reasonable work day that doesn't leave you exhausted and depleted, and so that you can have the energy and the time to do other things that still bring you joy. And like you say, you do some work for the Jackson Zoological Park. And what kind of animals do you work on there?
I have done anywhere from snakes with pneumonia, a anteater with a Clostridium infection. I've, of course, given a large elephant an enema. So there's always something challenging, and that was all volunteer work. And now I'm on as a paid relief. But the enjoyable parts was just not getting paid and just being able to have the time and the ability to go do that.
How amazing. How on earth do you diagnose an elephant with constipation so that you know that you need to give him an enema?
Well, that was actually a really funny story. If we can take just a moment, this was 2003. I was actually out at the guard base doing my military work when the phone rang, and it was very, very cold that morning. Or during that night, and they called me to let me know that she had gotten out of her room that night and locked herself out. So she was outside and gotten hypothermic. Oh. And as the vet tech at the zoo was describing all of these to me, I had one hand to the phone receiver talking, and a little nod. I said, well, let's warm her up. Let's do about a 40-gallon enema. And the look on the people in the room with me would have stopped all time. And as I hung the phone up, they like, what was that? I said, what's your problem? I got an elephant with a colic, okay? It's no big deal. And that story made it all the way to the commander. So that was quite the event.
Oh, okay. So the enema was to warm the elephant up. It was warm water.
Yes.
Amazing. Oh, poor elephant. Did she do okay?
She did well.
Oh,
she
good.
did well. Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, so future veterinarians out there, take a listen. Giving a warm water enema is one way to counteract hypothermia. I love that. So now, when you first started with the FSIS, you were an in-plant veterinarian. Tell me a little bit about what your job was like then.
Okay. And a lot of times when I describe some of the veterinarians, it's not unlike being in practice. You've got some offline people. You've got your veterinary technicians to help you with some of the food safety tasks during the day. But as the veterinarian, you are the subject matter expert. When you're taking samples for antibiotics or chemical residues, you will do many of those tests until you feel you have the confidence in one of your inspectors to train to do that test. Of course, when results come back in, they see something like chlorals, tetracycline, ampicillin, chlorophenol, and they look at that and go, Doc, what does this mean? You already know what that means. You're the subject matter expert, and then you educate them. You're also the administrator, arranging them time to be off on their vacation, be for their family vacations, the ball games, and so a lot of staffing type issues, not unlike a clinic, and then any other services. We export a lot of products, kind of like having a groomer on board. But then we're also dealing there with the industry management to verify that the practices they're doing produces a safe food product, is not promoting any sanitary conditions, that the health and the wholesomeness of that food product is maintained the entire chain. And so you as a veterinarian are the team leader in that plant to do all of those tasks. And then for the postmortem checks, these checks, the online inspectors, once again, you are the subject matter expert. You are telling them, yes, this can be salvaged and still used for human consumption. No, this is unacceptable and be condemned, and so on and so forth. And so over time, as you're training a new inspector, you're working very closely with them. And then as you build confidence in them and their knowledge, skills, and abilities, they've switched over. And then, hey, you let me know when something's wrong. I'll go focus on somewhere else. So being the team lead there is very rewarding. And most of the companies do appreciate us having us there to provide, the satisfaction that their product meets the USDA standards, gets that mark of inspection. And you find it rewarding. There's some long days sometimes, especially around holidays, that the company's trying to get a lot of product out, either for business sales or people traveling. And there'll be an occasional Saturday, which they pay you full time and a half, and the pay is quite well.
Wow. Okay. So did you get really good training when you first started this job, or were you just sort of thrown in there?
No, absolutely not. Our training program is about 6 to 8 months long before you report as an inspector in charge. We want you to have all the full knowledge and skills to do the basics. Of course, it's like coming into practice right out of vet school. You do have this little bit of lack of self-confidence, but there's at least with USDA, there's safety in numbers. Everything is there. You've got colleagues and mentors and supervisors you can depend on. And we work very hard to make sure people are making the right decision and not left out on that limb, so forth. And give them the right tools even before they report. Right.
That's got to reduce the stress level considerably, I bet.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember going to an inspection plant when I was in vet school and having I think it was a pathologist that brought us there, and he was talking about all the things that you look for. And I just remember thinking, my gosh, it looks so complicated. How could you, you just come out of vet school and go do that? Oh my, but it's good to hear that you guys have a comprehensive training program. So you would really feel very comfortable once you started.
As I tell most of the incoming, we train you everything we need you to do, just because it is so different from what you'll learn, especially as the schools are getting more toward clinical practice these days. What we do, you get a little spurt of it in your second year public health class. I do get to go to and present what I have as regulatory veterinary medicine to the LSU School of Veterinary Medicine second year class, and then to the Mississippi State University second year public health class too. And so that I always find that rewarding. I get a lot of questions, a lot of input during the classes, because sometimes even a veterinarian student doesn't understand where their food comes from.
Right. I don't know that I necessarily understand. I don't know behind the scenes what's going on. I'm sure it's very complex. So, what are some of the main points that you cover when you go and you talk about regulatory veterinary medicine? Are you trying to give them a window into how to enter that kind of career, or are you just telling them the facts of regulatory veterinary medicine in general?
Yeah, and it's regulatory veterinary medicine in general. The fact that, there are veterinarians that work for the National Institutes of Health. There are some that work for the Centers for Disease Control, the Epidemic Intelligence Service. All of the careers in federal, state, and military governments that use veterinarians in specific roles throughout. And I've had a couple really good experiences in my lifetime dealing with the Deepwater Horizon oil spill back in 2010 as I became the USDA liaison to the Coast Guard. And, people were calling worried about the food that they were getting out of the Gulf of Mexico. And although they didn't have an FDA representative there, I was able to answer most of the FDA questions also and give to the Coast Guard through their public affairs office.
Wow. Now, during that time,
one of the many.
Yeah. Were you guys were you working with a team of biologists, or were you sampling the fish and then testing it for, toxic levels of, hydrocarbons? How did you reassure people? Like, what data and where did you get the data?
And it was all of the above. All of the above. Of course, the Coast Guard and NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they were providing reports for oiled waterfowl, the pelicans, the shorebirds, many of the birds that were getting affected by the oil, and were having cleaning stations set up from that. And then, of course, you also had the surface contamination assessment, also known as SCAT teams, going around the beaches looking for the tar balls and any other sign of slick that came ashore, but reporting, quantities in the booms. And then, there were oysters getting sampled. There were shrimp getting sampled in the affected and in the unaffected areas. And, of course, the presidential administration put a moratorium on any extra drilling there. Also gave, what were safe zones to continue to capture fish and eat from. And even now, BP is still sponsoring assessment teams to check with, what are the permanent effects of such things. And then all right in the middle of this, the sea turtles were coming on land to lay their eggs. A new whole study was going on with NOAA and their team, actually relocating, for fear of the oil contamination, relocating some of the sea turtle eggs over to the Atlantic seacoast. And so it'll take 20 years to find out some of that data.
Wow.
So being in the public affairs office, many things were going on, but it was such an interesting and such a challenging piece. One of the pieces I got actively involved in addition to all of this was the Migratory Bird Habitat Initiative. Since all the birds fly south into the marshes, they were also anticipating the oil was going to have a very detrimental effect on the waterfowl flying south and their food sources. So there was this preemptive attempt to provide some of the food sources a little further inland for the birds. And BP was willing to spend a certain amount of money and had to justify what was actually needed there.
Wow. Now, so being a public affairs liaison, this isn't directly related to your position with the FSIS, right?
Well, no, it was actually department, the Department of Agriculture. Every federal agency had a liaison officer to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard obviously has a specialty in one thing. But while people were knocked out of their jobs to the drilling moratorium, they were worried about some of the seafood they were getting from the stores. They wanted each federal agency represented in their command center to answer some of these questions.
Okay, so because you are with the USDA, you were appointed, or did you volunteer?
I volunteered, yes.
Okay, so they came to you and said, there's this going on, and we need somebody to play this XYZ role, and you said, that's me.
That was me, and provided a historical experience dealing with incident command, being military and other command services, and we've had some other type emergency situations from exotic Newcastle disease in 2005 out in Nevada and California several years ago. Several of those things that I've had really good experience with.
Wow, so exciting! I mean, it doesn't sound like you could get bored.
There are some moments, but I do seek. I'm not quite the adrenaline junkie, but I do seek out things to challenge me, and so I think that's part of veterinary medicine, to find that rewarding career and not just get into the daily grind, but find other things that keep you challenged, that keep your daily renewal on.
Right. I think this is a recurrent theme, Dr. Thompson, that I've been hearing. And it sounds like really, if you want to have a happy career as a veterinarian, you can't just follow the beaten track. You've got to be proactive, and you've got to think about who you are and what kind of lifestyle you want and what kind of things make you happy, and then proactively craft your career according to those characteristics, rather than just, I graduated and now I'm going to work in clinical practice and that's it.
And Dr. Kong, you are absolutely correct. You are responsible for your own happiness and job satisfaction. Many of us in the population, work is still a 4-letter word. You need to make the most out of it. I've certainly tried to do so. Like, veterinary medicine is my whole life. It's my work and my hobby. And I find more and more positive things to do with it each time. And as I do that, although there's not necessarily a thank you on it, or that immediate gratification you may get from a client that you've saved from an immediate hit by a car or urgent situation, the impact you see in what I do is just it's outstanding.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you've got a really great work-life balance, which is why, I think that a lot of people, they go into clinical practice. This happened to me in my second job out of school. It was so all-consuming that I didn't have time or energy left over to think about anything else. But you've got a great balance of your work, which is veterinary medicine related, but leaves you enough time and energy afterwards to still have that passion for veterinary medicine. And so those are your hobbies as well. That just sounds like the ideal.
And I think I have found the great balance now. We just came off a weekend with another company. My wife and I have launched our own little independent business with a company called LifeVantage. It talks about health and wellness. I traded some of the information with you. We're in Indianapolis with 7,000 other independent distributors, another 750 doctors, chiropractors, dentists, veterinarians, learning about this whole new science called NERF2 and health and wellness. One of the few companies making an antioxidant activator for dogs. That's what got us started. And now seeing the entire benefit for this, for health and longevity, for people too. And so we're just sharing the story with it, because this is a small company. They call themselves biohackers, changing nutrigenomics through some natural plant compounds. And it has just been meeting after meeting, is just building on their successes, and it's great to be a part of it.
Right,
and it's an excellent part-time opportunity. They certainly design it to where there's no full-time work. They want you to work part-time. You can either have another job or you can just do this, but it's all part-time for them.
Well, I may look into that. And we have been talking about it, and I apologize, I haven't had time to actually read the scientific papers that you sent me, although I still intend to do so. I had a group of girlfriends from vet school visiting for a week. So as you can imagine, There was no work getting done. But it's fascinating to me because I know that there's a lot of research right now in the area of age reversal or slowing down the aging process. And there's some really exciting stuff, whereas 10 years ago, it was just, it was like looking for what's that? The Fountain of Youth. It was like looking for the Fountain of Youth, It was a fantasy. But now they're actually starting to identify some compounds, not just the compounds, but they actually understand the mechanism of action of some of these compounds and how they might actually reverse or slow down aging. So this is one of those products. I take one, as I told you, I take Elysium, and you weren't able to find any good information on that. But so perhaps I'll look into your product. But so this is just like, it sounds like you've got multiple streams of income going here. You've got your full-time job, you've got your part-time job with the Jackson Zoological Park, you've got your work with LifeVantage. Yeah.
Well, my zoo job is more volunteer than it is paid. Most of the time, if I go out there, I'm just there on standby. Now, if I have to go in and do surgery, but if I'm just on a phone call for consults, the regular veterinarian leaves, he's out for the weekend, and they have an emergency call. I'll go in. But the past couple of years, it's just been hey, we noticed he had a little loose stool. His antibiotics for this. Should we change it? And, just give a supportive call there. Okay. And so I don't bill them for that. They still give me free admission. So I still love to come out there and help out when I can. So I just do that more of support for the zoo, because same thing. It is an educational opportunity. These days, I just turning 54. I'm into getting the next generation ready. Like I say, my a little bit of spare time, I do support with the FIRST robotics. I have a little neighborhood team down here learning about engineering. So I'm still filling my engineering desire just a little bit. Helping those kids learn, how to build robots, what the game challenge is, setting up the business plan and their outreach. And it's still reliving being 16 again.
Wow. It must be so satisfying.
When you see them come out, absolutely, to win an Inspire Award, to see all of their hard work put into something that, although it's a game, to see them solve the problems, to see them build and engineer something to solve the problem, certainly gives hope for the next generation.
Right, exactly. I think that a lot of scientists, doctors, veterinarians, biologists, whatever, are lamenting it just seems like most of the general population isn't interested in science, and there's such a need for it. It's so crucially important that we be scientifically literate. So for you to be working with a group of kids and that they're actively practicing the scientific method and building things and solving problems in a scientific way and succeeding, that's amazing.
Yes, I commend Dean Kamen for inventing FIRST, which stands for Interest and Recognition in Science and Technology, the Lego League, the First Tech Challenge, and then the First Robotics Challenge, for those to include those math and science skills. So everyone in the world has that interest and improvements in their knowledge and skills in STEM. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also volunteer with NEPRIS. You were telling me that's the online platform where via teleconference, you go and talk to kids in classrooms all over the country, and you talk about being a veterinarian.
Yes, absolutely. And just like how you and I connected, it was on the LinkedIn social media. What I did, I got approached by NEPRIS one day, and you have some unique stories and skills and work experience as a veterinarian. Would you like to, reach into a classroom anywhere in the U.S., even Alaska, to high schoolers that are interested in a career in veterinary medicine? So I've gotten to do that approximately 30 times now in the past couple of years. And same thing, it's rewarding. We always seem to go back to the zoo stories. They're always fun. but, just having the other solid foundation of the veterinary medicine, as being your bread and butter, and then you put a little jelly. That's usually a good zoo story.
Yeah, I heard your cat, and now I see your cat there in the background. So what are these kids that you go and talk to about veterinary medicine? Is there like a recurrent theme that everybody seems to be curious about in particular, or is there just a vast diversity of questions that you get?
And yes and no. I've had second graders that call themselves a zany zoologist, and we were learning just basic science, animals with a backbone, vertebrates. And it was a neat learning experience for me to come back and build a couple slides and tell them, how we use this in veterinary medicine, having some of those basic skills of how would you treat an animal without a backbone and how you treat an animal with a backbone, and some of the things there. To actually, the state of Louisiana requires students in their senior year to conduct a career self-assessment, and they actually come on the NEPRIS for 20 minutes, and I evaluate their presentation of themselves as they're presenting their strengths and their weaknesses and their aptitude to become a veterinarian. And so I have to grade papers. I have to grade a presentation and identify their strengths and weaknesses, what works well, and should I suggest something that they need to work on, And usually as veterinarians, we tell them, get some type of accounting or financial acumen under your belt, because I found that piece quite challenging in veterinary practice. Coming out and figuring out the business, that extra stress of the payroll taxes, the Social Security taxes, the workman's comp, everything to figure out what you needed to do to make a profit. And that's a lot on someone right at the beginning when you still wanted to get your confidence of being just a technocrat, as being a veterinarian. You've learned all these technical skills. Now they want to throw all these managerial or business owner skills on top. And I think that certainly adds to that stress level.
Interesting. So you're saying to these kids, hey, before you get into vet school, because I know once you get into vet school, there's not going to be any time for that, right? So before you get into vet school, start building your skill set in finances and management, and perhaps business ownership, if that's something that you're looking at. Even if you don't end up owning a practice, you can make yourself an incredible asset to a hospital if you have those skills.
Absolutely. And it's just been, I know my wife talks about that a lot. She's never really wanted to be part of the practice owner. She wants to maintain an associate, and that's been very good for her. Luckily, I've take over the other responsibilities. And like I say, she does the other simple things that keeps our lives together and somewhat manageable. But from ours, the business aspect is mine.
Is yours. Yeah. So these kids that are presenting to you and they're trying to make the case of that they could be a veterinarian. What are some of the qualities that you think that you could identify in somebody who's a high school student or undergrad student? What are some of the qualities that you think you could identify in somebody that make you think, yeah, you could be a veterinarian?
And one of their statements is, I love animals. And, as veterinarians, we hear that I love animals. Yeah. And then my usual comeback, would you prepare to do something maybe you don't agree with, but yet the owner of that animal insists that you do? Say, for instance, an animal and I usually bring up euthanasia. Would you be capable of relieving an animal of suffering and pain and recommend that to an owner or a client to do what's best for that animal? Or would you feel comfortable or unnerving when someone insists that it is about them and, relieve any suffering or pain on the animal, but keep it alive as long as you can because it's strictly dependent on that person? That person's in their selfishness wants that animal in spite of the pain and suffering the animal is receiving on its own. Mm-hmm. And usually we bring that one in. Can you do that? Because there's a third party in this contract you're dealing with that animal. There's, yourself, that animal, and then it's human. And it's going to ask you some questions. You're going to have to be able to communicate with its owner too. And, when they come in and say, well, I don't necessarily like working with people. Well, that's going to be a very important part, is communicating with people, because the animal can't tell you what's wrong. You're going to have to find out what's wrong and then relay that to the customer in a way that they're willing to pay for your services. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I said, that's going to be the key to your success in practice.
And so when you tell these kids that, okay, you love animals, but here's the other side, or you don't like people that much, but here's the other side. What's the reaction that you get? I mean, are they dissuaded, or do you see them just recalibrating their expectations in a more appropriate direction?
Absolutely. I think it's the recalibration. Mm-hmm. I haven't really thought of that aspect. And yes, I will focus some more efforts in that arena.
That's excellent. And I think that's so important because, even I went to vet school. It was a second career for me, so I wasn't a spring chicken. I'm not naive. Well, at least about other things. But when I went into vet school, it was because I loved animals and I love science too. But I don't think I was prepared for the complexity of the relationships that you have to manage in order to try to help animals. It's certainly... Mm-hmm. The animals are just a small part of the bigger picture of being a veterinarian.
You are so correct. And I could just, pulling from my experience as a practitioner, even back in 1980, 89, yes, I had to develop the confidence in my own skills of seeing, of doing internal medicine, of operating the x-ray machine, of drawing blood and doing things, especially right there in front of the clients. You get more and more confidence because in vet school, those 4 years, you still only get about 6 weeks of actual hands-on dealing with clients in your small animal or large animal loop. But then that other part of going in and, all right, this is how much you bill. This is the charges you're going to, or how much is your worth? And same way explaining to clients, when they come in and it's always just a small symptom or a sign. And then you look and you find out there's lots more going on, and you're going to need to call the clients back and tell them what's going on. And you're going to have to request additional fees for laboratory fees and even surgery for that part. And getting there okay up front when they're still not quite sure what's going on, those are important pieces. And you can't waste too much time there, because you will really learn that time is money.
Oh, hell yes.
Your time is so precious that you don't want to waste any of it, because, at the end of the day, as much as you like the animals, you still want to go home and relax for a bit. I call myself, I like to cook. Being out of Louisiana, part of my stress relief is cooking a nice meal. And one of the most stressful parts for me when I was at home, getting my skillet oiled and ready to go, is the emergency pager beeper would go off, and I'd have to stop and leave and not come back till 9 p.m. That part was not enjoyable, even though that part disappeared when I was actually seeing the calf, or, helping deliver a dystocia, or dealing with a horse that had been hit by a truck. It was, I still didn't get my little piece of me at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. And it's just, and there's some rural vets, and there's just no other choice for them, because they're in a small town and they're the only vet. And I just hope that the community in there that they're in appreciates them, because it just seems like more than should be asked of any single human being. And yet there are vets like that doing that day after day all over the country and all over the world. And my heart just goes out to them. So much appreciated.
And some of them have worked quite well into getting that relationship going and say, hey, I want to go see my daughter's ball game. I want to go see my son practices his robots. When customers understand you have a life, those are your greatest clients and customers.
Yes.
However, there are some that are unappreciative, that you are there at their beck and call and get very upset if you're not available, even though you may explain to them, hey, this is not an emergency. And, that's when it's nice to say, hey, there's an emergency clinic a few miles down the road. Go see them. We didn't have that luxury, 30 years ago, but at the same time, that has helped in today's society, today's veterinary careers, that there are some of these emergency clinics. Now living in that semi-rural here, Jackson, Mississippi's, 300,000 in the metropolitan area, we have a emergency and referral practice. And although my wife still has a couple of very special clients that, we'll break our mold and go tend to them just because they're either some of our best friends, some of our best clients. And, you have to be careful who you share your cell phone number with.
That's for sure. But there are, there's always a couple for each of us. Some people who are especially wonderful and respectful of boundaries. And I will be there for those people. Absolutely. Anytime, night or day, because they don't abuse it and they appreciate it. So tell me about, what is your regular day-to-day like as a deputy district manager, overseeing all of these different food safety employees and 450 processing facilities? What is a typical day for you?
Okay. Well, usually first thing in the morning, and we have some processing plants that start at 9 o'clock the night before, getting off at 5 a.m. Something has gone wrong during the production process. It'll be in our email when we get to work. Help to determine if there's some product that we have to recall. I think you may have seen on the news this weekend, 500,000 pounds of chicken breast patties with little pieces of rubber in the patty being recalled. And although it's not truly harmful, nobody wants to eat a piece of rubber in their chicken patty. We do have equipment malfunctions on occasion, and so we'll work with those. We'll also work to make sure that everybody's staffed, especially when the winter time around, the winter precipitation. We have trouble folks getting to the office, getting to the plants. And then we also have some humane concerns that we have to work with. The animals that are being brought in, that they're not all iced up and, they were taken care of. The industry has a big responsibility for the welfare of the animals when they're coming to these plants and at the plants, which we also have regulations to enforce, especially on the livestock side. And then it just begins their operations. A lot of times we may hold up an operation if it's not clean. Let's say today's a Monday. They've been down for the weekend. Monday morning, we may come in a little earlier to do a sanitation check. And, we may get a call from a company. Hey, my doc has my plant closed up this morning. What's the deal? And of course, we'll get the third party in on there and said, they didn't bother to clean the chiller this weekend. And so, we're here enforcing the regulations for a, clean plant, the start of operations. And then through the day, if there's something else like the furlough that just happened a couple weeks ago, Washington is giving us our orders. What are we going to be doing through the week? Or some other study. If there's been a report, we may get notification from the CDC that there's a cluster of illnesses associated with ground beef. And we identify which of the plants we have that are producing ground beef. Other things that may come in, it's maybe time to promote someone. We've got a vacancy from an online inspector to an offline. So I'm viewing resumes and promotion certificates to promote someone. Same way, I'm calling veterinarians or interviewing veterinarians into positions that they may want to move from one plant in Baker Hill, Alabama to Gadsden, Alabama. And I got to review the certificates to find out, which one is the most qualified to do that such. So it's a daily, it stays busy. We're kind of the middle of that hourglass between Washington and the field. So we hear the best and we hear the worst right there in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you were talking about, looking out for the welfare of the animals, that made me want to ask you a little bit more about when you had to go and do those humane handling investigations, Puerto Rico, California, Alabama, because some animal rights groups had lodged some complaints. Well, tell me a little bit about that. What happened and what did you find?
Well, some is differences of opinions. I mean, we have some regulatory standards, some very strict standards that animals shall be insensible, free of any pain prior to any shackling, hoisting, casting, or cutting the dressing process. And some of the people that, or some of the animal groups just feel that, just using the animals for food is inhumane, period. And they may either inflate some claims. One of the ones I investigated over in California was a hog operation. And they were really resentful that there was a Hispanic population there playing some loud salsa music. And they were stunning the animals in a group and felt that, one hog seeing another hog stunned to insensibility for slaughtering was inhumane. And, through science and whatever, we know that they don't represent that. They don't respond to the death of another animal in that way, at least not behaviorally. Now, we know there's some other species, some of the wild geese and the swans that mate for life. Yeah, they're looking for their mate, but these domestic animals don't really know the difference. Mm-hmm. And so we supply information back and provide them a response. Say, look, we didn't find anything that is non-compliant with our regulations. Yeah, the perception is, perception's in the eyes of the beholder, but we don't have any regulatory piece. Now, one of mine in Puerto Rico, we had some very inhumane handling there, not providing additional walking surfaces or ramps for the animals to exit a second floor or second step of a truck. And so the animals were actually having to fall some 3 to 4 feet to get down. And of course, that was injuring the animals. So we had to stop that, because part of their process was causing injury to the animals, and that was certainly a regulatory violation. Mm. And so, that was 2006. And so, but these companies have learned through the years that, our veterinarians are going to enforce those regulations. This is the last thing. These animals are providing a service for us. So having some of the decency to treat that animal with welfare and concern, we take great passion in dealing with that aspect.
Mm-hmm. So it's good to know that even if they may be unfounded, that complaints are investigated.
They are addressed and looked into thoroughly. Yeah. And of course, we deal with Congress quite a bit as the public impressions change. There are laws being introduced to improve or remove some of the welfare. A couple of years ago, you may have been involved, and I was certainly really involved in dealing with the horse slaughter for consumption. Of course, horse is not typically a food source for humans here in the United States. It is for some of my favorite cats at the zoo, so I still want to do it properly when we are slaughtering horses for some of the zoo animals that do eat meat and things. Still want to be respectful of that animal that's being sacrificed in that method. But, there are some very firm opinions on both sides of that debate. And as the public process goes along, we're still not permitting that based on the will of the American public. So we still have a little bit of that political process, that great debate of doing what the will of the people is. And currently that still is, no no USDA inspection slaughter of horses in the United States. Now, it still goes to Canada, still goes to Mexico. My belief, my opinion, we can do it here in the United States. We can do it humanely and provide a source, not necessarily for the U.S. humans that, either despise or just will not eat horse meat. But that is an excellent protein source for some of my big cats at the zoo that can use that. Relatively inexpensive, and same way that farmer, rather than may have won't be much, but some financial support of giving the end times for that animal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's just never as simple as it seems to be on the surface. And I remember all the debates about horse slaughter in the United States, and I remember the horse slaughterhouses in the United States, having to shut down because legislation had been adopted that was compatible with public opinion. And on the surface, that might seem a victory. It might seem a good thing. It might seem a step in the right direction if you care about animal welfare or animal rights. But on the other hand, I think the unforeseen circumstance is that these horses now get shipped down to Mexico, and I don't think that Mexico adheres to animal welfare standards as well as the United States does. That's just my guess, but.
And we anticipate sort of the same thing. And many of these animals are in poor health and don't handle the transport that well either.
Right.
Some of them that aren't transported are either turned loose and left to die out in the pasture and starve. And so we're trading one for another. And so I don't think we're dealing with what's best for the actual animal sometimes when you're dealing with some of that.
Right. It just seems like, it was an emotional campaign, and the decision was based on emotions, and logistics were not taken into consideration, or they weren't heard. And unfortunately, the result is more suffering for the horses, which really makes me sad because, I believe these people had the best of intentions, but
absolutely. Emotions run high, but getting back to that,
you gotta check your emotions, and you gotta look at the data, and you gotta look at the logistics if you really want to do something good, because now you've accomplished what you wanted to, but suffering has increased, and it's just such a tragedy.
Yes.
Very interesting case study, though, on the importance of looking at data and checking our emotions at the door when we're making those decisions. But so the way that you and I met is also via LinkedIn. I saw your post, and I think the title of the post was something to the effect of veterinarians today would like more work-life balance. And, call me because the FSIS needs veterinarians. So to tell me, are you looking for veterinarians all over the country, or is it just in your district? And what should somebody do if they're interested in looking into this opportunity?
Okay. Well, that was actually a photo. I took a picture of the January JAVMA of, I think it was 14 different veterinary careers, and USDA and other veterinary occupations were two of the lowest on the graph for wanting more time, more free time. Equine practice, small animal practice, some of the others had these huge graphs out of wanting more time away. And then there were only a couple of them that actually wanted more time at work. But anyway, took that picture, and we know in dealing with recruiting some of the new veterinarians that their life is important. And as we see in a lot of job satisfaction as we're getting more and more females into our profession, it's time off to have a family. It's the one wage earner where, that culture, that generation of the greatest generation has moved on. And the demographics of the veterinary profession have really changed. my class was about 50-50, male, female. Now almost 90% of the classes are female. And yeah, they're not looking to work their entire life as though many of the men that were, self-ascribed providers or workaholics is an old term. But we know people still need an income. It's still one of our most valuable assets of humans. Having a life is also having an income. And we provide a balance here in the Department of Agriculture. It is shift work, usually Monday through Fridays or Sunday night through Thursday night for some of those that like those nighttime hours. And, when it's over with, you go home. Plus the pay and the other benefits, paid vacation days. Other than a couple of the large corporate practices, USDA, FSIS is one of the largest employer of veterinarians in the United States, about 1,500 to be exact. And our sister agency, the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, that also goes out to the farms. They're actually on location for the animal health at the farm level or at the wildlife level. If they're doing veterinary services, trying to find TB in some dairy herds or pseudorabies in some of the farm swine herds. They're dealing a lot right now with the feral swine operations. And then, of course, avian flu is always on their watch and surveillance. But usajobs.gov is a website for all people seeking federal employment. And you can go in there, post an online resume, search by keywords. And, of course, we have, at least my states alone, I still have approximately 10 vacancies I'm needing to fill. The Denver district covers most of the West Coast except California, even up to Alaska, has several, probably even up to 20 veterinary vacancies right now. And the neat thing is we probably have a location probably within 50 miles of where you live.
Where I live?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Everybody has to eat to live. Now, some participate in the protein products less than others. We do have, a large population of vegetarians these days. Mm-hmm. But those that are still eating meat, poultry, and catfish products, we have a need for veterinarians to make sure that supply is safe. Even with the commercials to say, free of antibiotics, free of any hormones, any chemical residues, that is what we do. We're here every day and do lots of testing to verify that those statements are true.
Mm-hmm. I just have to go back. This is going to just seem like it's coming out of nowhere. But in the beginning of our interview, you mentioned chloramphenicol, and I remember, wait a minute, that's like never supposed to be given to food animals, ever. So do you find it?
Nope.
Okay.
Never found it. That was a national board question. That one's one of those that just stays stuck in my head. But
absolutely.
We do find some tetracycline now and then, very occasional. A lot of times the alternative species, some of the sheep and goats, we may find a residue now and then. But it is, I think the data came out from the National Residue Program the other day, either 0.01% or 0.001% positive, which is, when they make that term non-detectable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So Dr. Thompson, do you have any general advice for people who are looking to become veterinarians in the future that you'd like to give?
Yeah, always keep your options open. You may think you have a primary interest in one particular type of medicine. My primary interest, I did want to be a great surgeon. Doing surgery when, I was never one of those that did not like my fingernails scratching down the chalkboard. Can't do that these days. That's something you miss these days, is the teacher scratching the chalkboard to get the kids' attention. But I found doing bone surgery that same effect and found it uncomfortable. So then I kind of realized that wasn't for me, but I still love the internal medicine, that problem solving, getting the subjective data, the objective data, developing your assessment. Did y'all have the SOAP? Did y'all still SOAP things? Okay.
Yes.
And even today, as I still teach kids about problem-solving methods, what SOAP, you use SOAP, and sometimes they get...
Just, would you mind just giving a brief explanation of what SOAP is for people who may not know?
Sure. SOAP was our problem-oriented solving method for veterinarians. First, you gather all your subjective information. That's the S. Then you're going to gather your objective information. That's the O. That's the lab data. That's your temperature, pulse, respiration. Are you going to do anything else? Your x-rays. So you're going to gather up those. Then you're going to combine those two and start assessing the patient, going through that problem, that differential diagnosis. And then once you come down to the most likely, you can either go back and gather some additional assessment data, some additional objective information, or some subjective if you need to, and then demonstrate your plan, what you're going to do to heal this patient. And, that was ingrained to us, at least in our fourth year student records, filling out those charts, and the problem page was SOAP. And so, and I use that for most everything. Even nowadays, even though I'm not dealing with a patient, I'm still in inspection, dealing. What's the SOAP? What's the stories I'm hearing? What's the data showing? And then how do we go back and solve that problem?
Oh, excellent. I love that. That's true. You could use the SOAP method for any kind of intellectual problem.
Absolutely.
It's a good structure. So keep your options open, because you never know once you get out there, what you're going to find as far as whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that environment can have a direct effect on your dreams. For me, one of those financial downturns just made it my ability to open up my practice, or even my family's dream to open up and hang my shingle right there in my hometown, just didn't work out. And when I look at it now, I'm much better off than what I had originally. My wife was from New Orleans. It's 3 hours back to my folks, 3 hours to her folks. So when we had our family, we didn't have the family disputes of having favorites, because they were both 3 hours away. Mm-hmm. But it did give us a chance to become our individual selves, our individual family also. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, even now at 26 years later, when I discovered finding out that people are looking more at naturalistic and holistic styles, whole body styles of medicine, we're seeing some of this changes. I heard little bits of it during school, how, of course, most all synthetic compounds start out as some natural compound, some plant ingredient found on the earth. My 3 years here dealing with LifeVantage has really improved and opened my eyes to another entire world of everything doesn't have to be a prescription medicine that's synthetically derived. And, there's some natural compounds that other cultures have been using for thousands of years that we're just now catching up to the science of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Keep an open mind. Right. Is there any last words that you'd like to offer? Anything else that you wanted to talk about before we start to wrap this up?
Well, you had talked about we were going to discuss a charity. Yeah. Of course, I do as many as we can. My children go to a Christian university in Arkansas called Harding. My son's studying cellular biology right now. But my daughter's been on a couple of missionary trips, come back always just emblazoned with, love for mankind and humankind, and, removing any self-pity or woe is me to helping someone less fortunate. That is always the best thing a person can do for themselves. Find someone less fortunate, make their life a little better, and it absolutely will make your life a little better. With my relationship here with this other company, LifeVantage, they do two things every year down to Cedar Point in Mexico, building homes for families that are basically either living under a sheet of tin, or maybe even a tent that they put a trash bag over when it rains at night to keep the tent from leaking. The company goes down every New Year's for 2 or 3 weeks, building homes for them, going worldwide, supporting Operation Smile, the kids that are born worldwide with the cleft palate. Mm-hmm. The support that this company gives, they take a huge portion of their profits and support these causes. And then they ask their fellow independent distributors like me to do the same. So our LifeVantage legacy has continued to go on. We support World Vision. Here I do the Mississippi Food Network quite a bit. Of course both our churches have missionaries abroad and support those as much as we can. And then, of course, every chance for a local animal shelter here around Jackson, Madison, Mississippi. We provide food where we can to help support what people are trying to care of, one of the other animal rescues. Whether they're a kill shelter or a no-kill shelter, we provide them all with even basis.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So in terms of action that a listener could take if he or she wanted to thank you for your generous time and advice today, is there like a LifeVantage charity fund, or just go to World Vision or? Yeah,
if you go to, World Vision is one. If you go to lifevantage.com, down at the bottom of the page is LifeVantage Legacy. Okay. The legacy opens up. And then also to FIRST, for interest in recognition in science and technology. Right. The program for training those kids coming up is just outstanding. And that's one I also, donate financially, plus lots of time associated with them too.
Yeah, wonderful. Excellent. So FIRST and LifeVantage Legacy. I'll put those in the show notes for people to follow. And just one last question I want to ask you. And I keep forgetting in the last couple of podcasts, because and there's so much to talk about in your bio. There's just so much to talk about. But may I ask you, if you don't mind, when you graduated from veterinary school, how much student loan did you have, and how much do you have left now?
Okay. We didn't cover that because that is such an important part. I finished with $27,000. My wife finished with $48,000, and between the two of us, it still took us 13 years to pay that off. Yeah. We, at least with USDA, they recognize a lot of that these days, and there's a federal government program called the Federal Student Loan Repayment Program. And for some of the jobs that are hard to fill in certain areas of the country, there is a lot of money available to help repay student loans and come to do your time in the federal service. So if you have some financial goals that you're trying to reach, that is a very recognized portion these days.
Right. And recently there's been all of this controversy surrounding some of these programs. Are you talking about if you go into public service, or you go work in a place that needs veterinarians or aren't enough veterinarians, and potentially you could have your loans forgiven after 10 years. And then people were saying that program was either going away, or that they thought they were qualified for this program, but it turned out that they weren't. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I do. And sometimes, when I have 120 veterinarians working for me, at some point in time, almost all of them had some student loans. And then we recruit maybe some newer vets that coming in, they get 10 or 20 or 30,000 of their student loans paid for. And then we get some sour notes back there. Well, why didn't you didn't help me repay mine? And like, well, it just is what it is. But a lot of times we may modify the veterinary student loan repayment program, which is a national, not just our agency, but our agency also comes up with its own, and we get a certain amount of money to set aside to do that. So once it's gone, it's gone. But we have some recruitments. Last week, I hired a veterinarian. If he has 25% of his first year's salary as a signing bonus, which is quite substantial, and if he stays in that location, he can get it for 3 consecutive years. And it's not student loan repayment, but I tell you, if you set that aside, you set that 25% aside of your first year's salary and devote it to your student loans, it will go a long way.
Right, because that big lump sum you throw at it is going to reduce the amount of interest it's accruing all the time.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's smart. It is very smart doing that.
Yes. Okay. So FSIS, you guys have some jobs. So you've got, for areas that are in desperate need of veterinarians, there may be a signing bonus that would allow people to maybe get a lump sum that they could throw at their student loans and make a big difference. Potentially. Okay. All right.
Can I put my website on here?
Absolutely.
For my LifeVantage business, that may be something that interests some of these other folks for an additional
I'm going to look
stream of income.
It myself.
I am at DVM prohealth.lifevantage.com. And it has my wife's picture up there, but we do this as she uses the products there in the clinic for the pets with lots of oxidative stress. And it is an incredible product that's scientifically supported and works.
Yeah, and the scientific article that you sent me, I am going to read it, and I will post it in the show notes as well, so other people can look into it, because this is a really exciting area of research, and I'm coming up on 49 years old, and I am actively looking for stuff that keeps me looking and feeling young. So I'm going to look into.
Well, there's another website called biohackingyourbody.com that talks about the discovery. And the reason it caught my interest, when I was my third year veterinary student in 1988, Dr. Joe McCord, the inventor of the product, was talking about, his thesis in the 60s at Purdue talked about the discovery of this enzyme in the body, superoxide dismutase.
Yes, and we learn about that. We learn about it in vet school.
Free radical damage. And when I was in my third year of vet school, some of my classmates started taking a over-the-counter supplement called superoxide dismutase. And they're like, this is from Dr. McCord's study. And then here I am, 25 years later, and Dr. McCord's name is back on up, has perfected the formula, not just taking the enzyme itself, because that enzyme gets digested in our alimentary system, found a way to activate the body's own system. And it's this really neat science. And once you learn about it, you say, hey, I understand this now. And he found just the ideal formula from some natural plant ingredients that other cultures have been using for thousands of years, just for basically the same benefits.
All right. Good to know. So for those people who haven't gone through biochemistry, haven't had the pleasure of learning about, oxidative damage to cells, it's one of the key players in the aging process, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And
called NRF2, nuclear erythroid factor 2. Yeah, and we didn't learn that enzyme pathway when I was in vet school, but they're teaching it now. So
right.
Very, very interesting.
Okay. All right. Dr. David Thompson, thank you so much for all of your time and advice and, telling us the candid story of your life. I've thoroughly enjoyed learning about your path through veterinary medicine and how you found happiness and balance and are able to do all of these other wonderful things that give you a full and satisfying and happy life. It's wonderful.
Well, Dr. Kung, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for finding me, reaching out to me from the LinkedIn. I did not anticipate this would come from something as that little post. I was truly trying to recruit some extra veterinarians for our jobs, but I hope this spreads the message even further that you can find your niche in veterinary medicine. Yes. And just look out for them. You never know when you'll find it or when it presents itself.
Yes, I think a lot of people are going to be interested in this. I know that there are a lot of clinicians that are feeling burned out and would very seriously consider taking a job at FSIS or a similar agency, and then they could have the flexibility that you have, where you volunteer for the zoological park, once a week or whatever, or do spay neuter once a week, so they don't have to leave clinical practice altogether, but they can have the same balance and sense of joy and passion that you do for veterinary medicine instead of getting burned out.
Absolutely, that is a key. That is a key point.
Yes, it is. All right. Thank you again. It's been such a pleasure.
It has been. Thank you, Dr. Cole.